All right, so Simon, we're here to talk about your five favorite drummers, and I love doing this with drummers themselves because you've got unique insight into what makes a great drummer. But it's not just about who's the best; it's about who had the best feeling, who inspired you, who plays drums the way you want them to be played, that kind of thing. So let's kick it off. Your
Mm.
first choice was Al Jackson Jr. So why him?
My number one, my number one choice. Why him? Because he's simple, he's solid. Um, I first heard of him back in grammar school in Bishop's Castle, and I'll digress a little. I was in. Someone told me about this singer Otis Redding. He just had this song called "Dock of the Bay," and it was okay. I mean, it was a little ballad, and the drums behind it didn't really stand out. But I loved the guy's voice, and my friend said, "You've got to get this album called Otis Blue," and it's one of the all-time great albums. Paul Rodgers cites it as one of his favorite albums. So I put it on, and the first track that I put the needle on accidentally was a track called "Down in the Valley," and I thought, "What is this?" The drums were just so solid and loud, and Midnight Hour had just come out I believe that same year. I'm sure someone will correct me, but that had Al Jackson playing on it, Wilson Pickett's Midnight Hour. And I just fell in love with this guy's simple style. And that was it, simple and solid. I read about him. He was a musician himself. He played bass, he played piano, but his main thing was drums. And he's still to this day, he's my number one influence. Al Jackson Jr., wonderful.
Fantastic. And he played obviously with Booker T and the MGs, and he worked with some incredible people, Elvis and Aretha and Eric Clapton, and you can list them off, can't you, really? Did you ever get to meet him? I know he died when he was young, but did you ever get the chance to meet him?
It's funny you should mention that, because when we were out in LA back in the mid-70s, Bad Company was sequestered in Malibu, of all places. And we were going to play in Memphis. And I thought, well, number one, I got to go and see McLemore Avenue, where the Stack studio was, which I eventually did, and saw his kit. It was a tiny kit, like a little 20-inch bass drum and a little 12x8 tom-tom. It was a 4-piece kit, very small. But it was during that week that I heard he'd been murdered. Some shenanigans went on in Stax Records, and I heard that it was a burglary went wrong, but rumor was that it was something a little more sinister than that. But poor Al was murdered, and I never got to meet him. One of the big regrets of my life. But I honor him by mentioning him in any interviews I do about drumming influences. So he's my number one guy.
Number one guy. It's a great number one to have. And moving on to number two, you talk about drums and influence. I mean, there's not many with an influence like this guy. Buddy Rich. Enough said, is what he said.
Wow. Yeah. Well, my first introduction to drumming was we just gotten our first TV back in the early 60s. And the very first program that I saw, was a program called All That Jazz. And it featured big bands. And I'd never seen TV before. So you can imagine the impact that these huge bands, maybe 12, 15, 20-piece bands, had on me. The influence was incredible, the impact rather. And then they focused on the drummer, and I went, wow, all these shiny cymbals and the lights shining off. And this was big band. It was swing. Which is kind of like the father to rock and roll in a way, or a distant relation. That and the tempos were great, la la la. And I remember an interview with the drummer, and it was Jack Parnell. He said, "Well, the governor is Buddy Rich," and I started trying to find footage, obviously way before the internet and Google and YouTube and so on, and I got an album of Buddy Rich playing, and I was just floored. what this guy could do. And I actually got to see him a couple of times in London when he came. He brought his big band to London, and one of the first time I ever saw him close, because Ronnie Scott's was a small club, and to see Buddy Rich no more than 12 feet from me was just incredible. His speed, his technique. He didn't read. He didn't read drum music. He didn't have charts.
Same.
He just counted off the tempo, and you just had to hang on for dear life. The most amazing drummer, the most amazing big band drummer. I hesitate to say the best because I'm not really of that school of thought where he's the best drummer. There's no such thing.
Yeah.
But you can say in sports, they're the fastest, they're the highest, because they're ruled by the stopwatch or the tape measure. But in music, it's all relative.
Yeah.
But Buddy, such an impact on me. I can never play like him. That's not my bag. But I recognize his sheer talent, and wonderful, wonderful drummer. Yeah.
Wonderful drummer. And the ability to be the center of the show as well. There's not many drummers that can be the Buddy Rich orchestra, the Buddy Rich band, and have their name in lights, is there?
Well, shyness was not part of his DNA. He apparently not the nicest guy on earth, but he survived heart attacks. He survived a couple of bankruptcies. Keeping a big band on the road took a lot more than just sheer talent. But he was a force of nature, and he will go down in the annals of drum history, as one of the all-time great drummers.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Right, let's move on to your third choice then. And it's the drummer from Little Feat, this one.
Richie Hayward. Now, I said in my email to you last week that, I could cite Ringo, I could cite Bonzo and Keith Moon, and trot out the 6 or 7 drummers that everyone, and they're all great. I'm not knocking them at all. But there are other drummers out there that are unsung, unheralded. And Richie Hayward, if any aspiring drummers out there, Richie ticks all the boxes. I mean, he's solid, he's inventive, very musical drummer. He had quite a large kit. He had, like 2 rack tom-tom, 2 floors, and a sort of large kit. But he was just, whenever I listened to him, even though he sadly passed away many years ago, I still go, wow. I mean, he was that good. Jazz influence, but he had that solid backbeat that rock and roll cried out for. And I was always a fan of his. He joined Robert Plant for a couple of years, and Robert was always singing his praises. He was just a great drummer, and he had wonderful empathy for the rest of the band. I mean, Little Feat were a band of excellent musicians anyway. And Richie drove them like no other drummer could. And I would, once again, any aspiring drummers out there to go on YouTube, watch his solos, watch what he did with Little Feat. And he was just a wonderful, wonderful drummer. Yeah.
Indeed.
I miss him.
I found a fascinating quote from him as well. He says, "I don't believe a drummer can have only one playing style." And people describe him as playing, he overplays, he underplays, and he plays around the beat as well, just to find the perfect match for the song.
Very good. I never heard that. And actually, Grumpy Lowell, every now and again, Lowell George, I wish Richie was a little bit more simple. But when you're playing in a band like Little Feat, which is quite sort of heavily influenced by jazz or jazz rock, Richie did play a lot of grace notes, a lot of, some people would say unnecessary notes, but around a very, very solid backbeat. And I can't state enough what a wonderful drummer Richie Hayward was. No question.
Absolutely. Right, we'll move on to your fourth choice. And this one is another fantastic drummer, but more of session drummer. He worked with loads of people and things like that. We're talking about Vinnie
Colaiuta.
That's it.
Right, you get £5. But it's Vinnie Colaiuta. Wow. Vinnie, my God. you know, there are certain categories of drummers, and there's people like Simon Phillips, Dave Weckl, the prog rock, you know, the jazz rock guys who I could never emulate. Not that I want to, but these guys are they're in another realm. You know, there's field drummers like myself, Levon Helm, Ringo, Bonzo. They play with feel. We can't read drum music. And then you get the upper echelon of the triumvirate of that genre would be Steve Gadd, Vinnie Colaiuta, Dave Weckl, Greg Bissonette, wonderful jazz. But the thing about Vinnie is, and I saw an interesting documentary about Jeff Beck, dear departed Jeff, who we all love. And when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, Jeff's backing group had Vinnie on drums. And Jimmy Page came on and gave a speech and inducted Jeff into the Hall of Fame, I believe for the second time, because he was inducted as a Yardbird a few years before. And they did the Immigrant Song, which, as you know, is a very high-paced Zeppelin song. And, you know, Jimmy started the riff. And Vinnie, who is used to playing, you know, 7/4 and 30-second notes and whatever, laid down this incredible backbeat with this pretty simple 4-piece kit. And I thought, wow, I didn't know he could play so simple and so solid. Fast forward to Sting's concert, which I saw online, and Vinnie did this incredible solo, and then he did this thing with Jeff Beck at Ronnie Scott's, which is one of the all-time great live concerts. Jeff Beck at Ronnie Scott's, Vinnie, Tal Wilkenfeld on bass, and Vinnie just stunned everyone with his ability to swing and be you know, quite complicated, play incredible time signatures. He's one of the all-time great readers, apparently. He can read and just, you know, decipher very complex drum music. But Vinnie Colaiuta is one of the all-time greats. Wonderful, wonderful drummer.
Absolutely. You mentioned complex drumming there, and anyone that can keep up with Frank Zappa and his ideas has got to be up there with the complex stuff, haven't they?
Yeah. I'd like to give a quick side mention to Ainsley Dunbar.
Yes.
Who didn't actually make my list, but because there are so many ancillary drummers around the 5 people that I've chosen that really do deserve a mention. But, you know, Ainsley played with Frank, and then Frank had this sort of finishing school for musicians. I mean, the amount of musicians that went through the ranks of Frank Zappa's band is endless. But Ainsley was a big influence on me back in the day. So yeah, Vinnie, there you go. My one of my all-time favorites.
Fantastic. And then we move on to your fifth choice, which was quite a surprising choice for me. I mean, most of my audience are kind of 50s, 60s. So this guy's only in his 30s. It's a young band. It's a young kind of drummer. So quite an interesting choice. Fill us in on this one.
Well, I don't know. Someone turned me on to Paramore, and I'm always, you know, I don't want to be the old fogey all of my life. And I believe one of my daughters turned me on. She said, "Dad, you got to hear this singer, Hayley Williams." I mean, she was like Gwen Stefani, but a younger version of Gwen Stefani, like No Doubt. Yep. And so I went on Apple Music, and I was in the gym, and I don't know what song I played, the best of Paramore. And Jesus Christ, who's playing drums? This guy, I mean, I can't really sing his praises high enough because he is just a wonderful, wonderful drummer. Zac Farro. Once again, he's similar. I guess if you cross Bonzo with Richie Hayward, you get Zac Farro because he's got this power that Bonzo had, this backbeat, which is just otherworldly. And then he'll do drum fills that just leave me with my jaw dropping. and his timekeeping, which to me is a central part of being a good drummer. Timekeeping. He neither rushes nor drags. His timekeeping is superb. So I went on YouTube, and I like the fact he's got a very small kit, 4-piece kit, a couple of cymbals. His drums are very low so that he can attack. They're not sort of in your face where you have to hit up. He hits down. And every time I play him, and I play Paramore a lot, he just blows me away. And to me, he's one of the new breed. And I've yet to Wikipedia him, but I'm sure you'll find that his influences are Bonzo, who seems to be the number one influence of all the today's younger drummers, and Neil Peart, But if you haven't heard Paramore, you've got to hear him, because Haley is a fantastic singer. They're a fantastic band. But Zac Farro is, for me, one of the great new drummers on the scene right now. And I can't wait to go to the gym and put him on again.